I get the privilege of opening it and sharing my enthusiasm for the topic and the project. It is hard to emphasize enough how important, critical, and transformative this project is, led by 1.5, the largest direct air capture facility in the world. So the topic here is DAC at scale, decarbonization solutions for hard to abate sectors. Very broad topic. We're going to start though with a deep dive, an updated, fresh deep dive into Stratos. This is the 1.5 DAC project, which we'll have Steve tell you more about, including with some very kind of recent info from a recent investors call, and some great animation as well about the facility. So kind of bringing us to Texas to see how it's happening on the ground out there. So we have about an hour and a bit, no, even hour 25 minutes for a discussion on the latest Stratos, and then there will be discussion with the panel open to the audience. So be ready to talk any kind of question, take advantage of the panelists here who have been in the trenches on the project and the DAC facility. Also, what policies and economics, make it make sense, and what to watch through 2025 and beyond, not only for this project, right, but other projects to potentially scale beyond for the US and internationally. So with that, I have very quickly Steve Kelly, President, 1.5. We have William Barrett, Vice President, Product Development at 1.5. And last but certainly not least, we have David Unger, Managing Director, Carbon Finance Lab. He's also the co-chair of AIDA's CDR CCUS Working Group. So Steve, do you want to take the podium and walk us through the presentation?
Good morning, everyone. Glad you could all make it for this early session, and thanks for the introduction. My colleagues William and David will jump in if I miss anything here. And as Katie mentioned, the idea here is once we've made this presentation, we really want to encourage questions and dive into this project and see what we can answer and get your kind of input, feedback on what you're seeing today. So just a little bit of background so that everyone's clear about some of the names that you're seeing. Carbon Engineering, Oxy, 1.5. Oxy is the parent company, an investor in Carbon Engineering going back 2018, 2019 timeframe, and then late last year completed the acquisition of the business. So the technology has moved now from being a partner technology to being an in-house technology for Oxy. 1.5 was established as a wholly owned division of Oxy a few years ago to develop CCUS technologies. So it is focused on direct air capture deployment and sequestration of CO2. And it sits within Oxy's carbon management strategy, where it's investing in full value chain carbon technologies. So Carbon Engineering goes back, it has a 15-year history. It was established in 2009. The picture you're looking at here is the Innovation Center in Squamish in British Columbia. They established in 2009 and then first extracted CO2 from the atmosphere in a pilot plant in 2015. And then the Innovation Center was developed to be primarily an R&D facility and a place where they could test out changes to plant configuration and new versions of the technology. The technology itself, which I'm going to talk through it while we look at the video of the plant that's in the construction. But just a few words on the technology as a liquid sorbent technology. It is essentially location agnostic. We don't need to place this close to any emission sources. It can go wherever it suits. From the point of view of geologic sequestration, access and availability of zero emissions power. And the technology itself uses basic chemicals. There's nothing exotic involved in this, and that applies to materials of construction as well. There are no unusual or difficult to obtain chemicals or catalysts involved. And the equipment is all very familiar. As you look through this, you'll see these are for example, the contactors are essentially repurposed forced draft cooling towers. So because it's all familiar equipment, there are existing supply chains that we can leverage in the development for plant construction. And that, coupled with the fact that it's a continuous operation, there's no shutting in and to enable the release of the CO2. It's a continuous operation, and combined with all of that familiar equipment, this means that it's really easy to scale up to megaton scale, climate relevant scale. So with that, I'm going to start the video here. So this is recent drone footage of the plant that's under construction. It's actually very close to completion on the construction phase of this, and we'll be getting ready to start the commissioning process in the early part of next year. And what you're looking at here on the outside are the air contactors that I referred to earlier. So this is where the start of the process is. We circulate potassium hydroxide solution through these contactors, draw in very large volumes of air, and the acidic CO2 in the atmosphere reacts with the alkaline potassium hydroxide to form potassium carbonate. And the potassium carbonate then is then routed to these pellet reactors. You see these tanks that are in front of the air contactors. And in those pellet reactors, we react the potassium carbonate with calcium hydroxide. And that forms calcium carbonate in pellet form. So we separate out the refreshed potassium hydroxide, which then gets recirculated to the air contactors. And then the calcium carbonate pellets go to the calciner, which is the tall structure in the center there. And in the calciner, we elevate the temperature to 900 degrees Celsius and you need to hear me right the way through this. We combust natural gas in pure oxygen, and that means that the combustion product is pure carbon dioxide and water, and that gets co-captured with the CO2 that is released from the calcium carbonate pellets at that elevated temperature, and that gets co-captured and then sequestered along with the CO2. So from the bottom of the calciner, we've got calcium oxide, and that calcium oxide gets taken to the slakers, which are just sort of between the pellet reactors, two slakers there you see. React the calcium oxide with water, and that reforms calcium hydroxide. So what I've just described are two loops. There's a potassium loop and a calcium loop. And they're just used to grab the CO2 from the atmosphere and concentrate it into pellet form, and then release in the calciner. So just to sort of zoom in on the calciner itself, from the top of the calciner, then we're taking CO2, separate out the water, and then we're able to compress that CO2, and it can then be used for, you can either take that for utilization purposes, making products, or in the case of Stratus, what we're going to be doing is taking that CO2, compressing it, and injecting it into a saline sequestration well that's located close by. So that's the way the technology looks, and I'm going to, once the video is stopped, I'm going to just talk a little bit about where we are in the process here. As I said earlier, we're very close to being construction complete, and by the early part of next year, we'll start commissioning the contactors, and we're expecting by the middle of 2025 to be commercially operational on the plant. So what you've just been looking at is a 500,000 ton per annum facility. But we have phased the construction. So here in the central part of it, where it's a central processing facility, this is the calciner section. this is 500,000 tons per year that's being constructed. But the contactor section of this is it's phase one. It's 250,000 tons per year in what's being built there. And in the rectangle that you're seeing at the bottom, this is where phase two is going to go. So while we've been constructing this plant, we've been optimizing. Remember, I showed you the innovation center. We use the innovation center to develop changes, modifications, optimizations to the equipment. And by taking this approach, we're now able to begin construction of the second phase to bring the capture part of the facility up to 500,000 tons per year in total. But there's going to be some significant changes to recognize the optimizations that we've been able to make already. There are 150 scientists and engineers working at the innovation center on improvements in the process. And the improvements that we've been able to make so far, this second phase, there are going to be 30% fewer air contactors. And the pellet reactors, which you see in the top part of this, there are 26 pellet reactors in phase one, and there are going to be 5 pellet reactors in phase two. So we're already seeing innovative changes, and we're expecting that second phase to be online by the middle of the following year, middle of 2026. So the strategy for meeting net zero is a combination of reduction and removal, and reductions by low carbon power, switching to low carbon fuels, energy efficiency, and of course point source capture is really important to meet the reduction side of the equation. But what direct air capture does is it provides that negative in the net zero calculation. So whatever we do on the left-hand side there are going to be residual emissions, and for those residual emissions, we need high quality, high performance, durable carbon removals. And how much an individual entity, a company or a country, gets the balance between these two things is going to very much depend on the sector that they're in. And I'm going to talk in a bit more detail about one particular sector, which is aviation. So IATA, as I'm sure you're all aware, is a trade body that represents over 300 airlines worldwide. And their roadmap to net zero in 2050 envisages a baseline of around 1.9 gigatons of emissions. And they meet the decarbonization pathway is a combination of a number of actions, efficiency of engines, efficiency of operations, a small amount of attributable to hydrogen aircraft, for example. But the bulk of the heavy lifting is envisaged to be carried by sustainable aviation fuel. And combined, all of those measures total around about 1.4 gigatons, and that leaves 500 megatons per annum of residual emissions that only removals can deal with. And of course, in estimating that contribution of sustainable aviation fuel, there's a lot of uncertainty around that. There are varying carbon intensities of different sustainable aviation fuels, and there are questions over ultimate capacity of the SAF industry. So as that changes, we need to modulate that. How much removals are going to be required to deliver the residual emission reductions? So the strategy has got to be clear. We know that we've got to get to this point of whatever you consider your end in the journey to net zero, 2050 in this case. To get to that 500 megatons per year of removals, we really need to be starting now, which is where Stratus comes in. This is the starting point where we're getting megaton scale plants on the ground, but we really need to get to this level of removals by 2050. And to get there, we really need to start low and build up from this point forward. So who is buying these removal credits from us? This is a sort of a list of the people that we've engaged with so far. And what these companies all have in common is that they're showing climate leadership, and they have robust reduction programs. So contrary to, sometimes it's often said that removals are going to be a substitute for action. the thing that all of these companies have in common is that they are taking action across the full spectrum of decarbonization. So Microsoft, 500,000 tons of credits, Amazon, 250,000 tons, Airbus, 400,000 tons, All Nippon Airways, 30,000 tons of credits. And then, you know, a number of other businesses here that have stepped up and are helping us stimulate this nascent but really, really important technology going forward. And why they're doing that, I think I've covered that. Really, it's a question of building up the removals piece of the decarbonization portfolio, recognizing that it's in order to be able to ensure that there is an industry around to deliver removals at the end of the journey. We need to have that industry being developed now. We're only 25 years away from 2050, and in order to be able to have an industry, and this, remember the 500 megatons that I was talking about earlier, that is only for aviation. There's estimates vary as to how much removal capacity is going to be needed, anything from 5 to 10 gigatons. So why carbon dioxide removal from DAC? I'm gonna ask William to step in at this point and just talk a little bit about the durability, the measurability and verifiability of these credits and the subject of compliance. Over to you, Will.
Thank you, Steve. Why carbon dioxide removal from direct air capture? Well, I'll kind of walk you around the quadrant here for some really good reasons. This is certainly not all inclusive, but these are top of the list, right? So you can look at the durability. The emissions that we're putting in the atmosphere at this point in time, point solutions, point sources, or from the legacy CO2 that we put in the air since the Industrial Revolution, it's going to stay there for basically for thousands of years. And so what we're looking for is a like-for-like solution. Direct air capture paired with secure geologic storage is just that. The durability is the same. It's thousands of years. And so what we're doing is it's not the easiest CO2 to capture because the capture efficiency, cost of capture is on a straight line correlation with the amount of CO2 concentration in the soil. We're capturing 400 plus parts per million in the air. But the thing about that is the air is the same around the globe. We get asked a lot of times, why don't you put the direct air capture plant in an industrial sector? Shouldn't the CO2 concentration be higher in the air? Well, it's not. The dispersion of CO2 in the atmosphere is a very efficient process, and you get very close to the source, and it's 400 parts per million. And so that's it's durable. We take the CO2 out of the air, and it remains out of the air. So that's one of the main things of the life in our technology. And it is a proven sequestration technology. As Steve mentioned, this is very novel what we're doing. We're taking existing technology and repurposing it in a new way. And so that's very exciting. One of the things that you will notice is that we are a company of action. A lot of companies are making announcements on plans of what they're going to do. And these are long lead time items. By the time you do the pre-feed, the detailed engineering, the investment, and then the construction of these large facilities takes up to 3 years. We will be operational mid next year. So construction has already been on 2 years on this project. Measurable and verifiable. There are no algorithms involved. We don't have to figure out and calculate, well, how much would we think we CO2 that we remove from the atmosphere, how much do we think is stored permanently? We meter these through physical meters. It's all tangible. The CO2 that we remove from the air goes through a meter. we transport it, and in this case, the CO2 sequestration will be basically on the same site as the direct air capture plant Stratos is located. We have secured the pore space beneath the plant. And so the transportation though is verifiable and transparent. And then the amount of CO2 that's sequestered underground is measured precisely. And that's the amount that the credits that are generated. And not only that, we have a robust monitoring and reporting verification program that's also transparent. So measurable and verifiable, that goes hand in hand with durability. And then this is compliant, right? It's accepted because it is so measurable, verifiable, and transparent, and the durability is recognized. We're working with the compliance organizations like ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, as their CORSIA program is writing the regulations and the rules on what is acceptable as eligible emission unit that will be used to offset the aviation emissions. And so the compliance is there as well. And we're very happy that this is being recognized by the compliance programs that are being developed in this time. And the last part of this is it's and when we talk about the SAF is a wonderful solution, but we can't rely on one solution. The SAF, the agricultural industry in the world is very robust and is able to scale up. But it's not the only answer, and there is a cost component there as well. And Steve, I'll let you kind of say more comments on the scalability that is an integral part of this whole equation, and the reasons why we are doing both from record.
Yeah, so continuous process, no shutting in, it's modular where it makes sense to be modular. The front end capture part of it, and we'll get economies of scale in the more central parts of the facility. But a brief word about SAF and that 1.1 gigatons of abatement that we're relying on SAF to deliver includes a significant wedge of e-fuels, because just the sort of used cooking oil, there's so much used cooking oil in the world, right? And other sources of biofuels. So in order to be able to deliver that kind of volume of SAF, it's going to need developing e-fuel, and e-fuel needs a source of carbon, and that's what that will deliver ultimately. It is, in addition to the ability to sequester CO2, it can also be a feedstock virtually without constraint to pair with green hydrogen and make improvements in the long term. So that's pretty well everything we have ready to show you. I'm going to ask David if he has anything, and indeed will, if he's got anything else he'd like to add before we throw it open to questions from your audience.
I'm not the engineer on this panel, but I want to put a little bit in a perspective what really Stratos means. We have voluntary carbon market 1.0. We know the size of it. This plant, for the first 5 years, is already pre-sold about 70% of its capacity. The annual production of this plant represents 20% of the current VCM market in value. This shows the game changer, and that's plant number one. When the first time I came across an in-depth discussion on DACs was in 2017 in the IEA workshop, where they called it science fiction. 8 years later, we are here. Until now, the largest plant was a 4,000 megawatt plant by our esteemed colleagues in Iceland. This is 500,000. It's also a very promising program. A year and a half ago, there was a DAC talk where some major climate experts expressed that it's impossible to reduce the cost, impossible to reduce the efficiency of that plant. I don't want to name the gentleman, but you all know him. You can find him. Here, the second stage proved it, that even within one plant or within one generation, you can improve the efficiency, you're going to improve the cost. So it shows the viability to be an instrument which will help price point one. And it's also very important to emphasize that this should be a global product. Should be no geographical limitation around the output of this plant. It should be used everywhere because currently the United States, one of the, due to its energy cost and everything, one of the most efficient places to do this. And by building more of this plant is half the cost of the plants, so we can deploy it in other parts of the planet. So I think these are very important details why we are building it and why this is truly exciting. And last but not least, mentioned it yesterday. When you look at the CCS world, the renewable world, you have tribes. You have the nature-based tribe, you have this tribe. It is wrong. We need it all, and this instrument can be a risk mitigation tool for nature-based tool. That's what we also try to work in our working group in AITA, how to bridge this gap. So this plan actually can be the first bridge between the two tribes to use them together. So.
Thank you, David. One thing I didn't mention, sorry, just one thing I didn't mention was next steps. So phase 2 that we've talked about. We also have a number of sequestration hubs along the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast. So good example of that is at King Ranch, just south of Corpus Christi, where we've secured we have the ability to put up to 31 megaton plants on the land there, and we've also secured the sequestration pore space on the King Ranch, which gives us at least 3 gigatons of storage. So we can take all of that 30 megatons of DAC, and we can also provide a service to point source emitters in the Corpus Christi region as well.
Steve, that's exactly what I was going to mention, that this is the first thing I'm very proud of it. We've got a very nice, we've got a very nice head start on this, because we do think time is of the essence. We're talking about climate change. But this is the first step. Stratos is the first step of a very scalable technology that we're ready to put out there. We have the ability to build and things that the market demands. We do believe that it moves the climate scale needed, so that's why we're doing this scale. So stay tuned for more good things to come.
David?
And I was just reflecting some of the conversation we had around the car premises with people who expressed interest in this and, oh, we need a pilot plan. Here's the good news. You don't need a pilot plan. We have a plan which can be your pilot and see that it's working. And with that, we also can help accelerate this progress and save money to people who want to be a pilot, and save time and to have action much earlier than if you're trying to go through cautious but unnecessary process to prove that it can be an operational and scalable technology.
Exactly.
Do you, can you hear me clearly with this? Not very good.
I'll take this with me.
Yeah, exactly. Is much better, right? So it wasn't all that long ago that we were sitting in a room, an invite room roundtable with many governments, and actually it was Cal who was presenting on Stratos, and some of the governments that shall remain nameless were like, how many tons? It was like 500,000 tons a year. 5,000? 500,000 tons? I mean, it's giant. It's big. And then the storage bay, Louisiana, right, and Corpus Christi, like we are talking scale. I know we talk scale a lot in these environments, but I mean, this is, and it's on the ground and it's happening, and it really is quite, human ingenuity and innovation at its peak. And it's exciting. It's new in delivery by mid next year. those tons. So I'm not sure, I'll start off, but then I'll open it to the floor. We'll get right into questions and you can go as high level or as deep and technical as you want. Like I said, this is a slate of people to ask. Did you mention CCS Plus?
Actually, we did not, but we should.
So I think that is important because it's also new and it didn't happen overnight, but also timing and sequencing is quite intentional, right? As Stratos gets up and running.
That's a great point, Katie. And yeah, we should definitely mention that building the plant, doing the research technology behind this, getting financed and built is part of the equation. There are many things that have to be lined up when you're talking about building a new industry. And part of that is having a methodology that the carbon accounting that's robust and has the same level of durability and preciseness as the technology that we're using. And so we became a founding member of CCS Plus initiative back 4 years ago, Dave. I think this was one of your brainchild. And the methodology was written by CCS Plus. This is not our methodology. This is a group of over 50 stakeholders, 50 different organizations with different backgrounds. An advisory group that has, Abate is part of the negative emissions platform, the zero emissions platform. We have the advisory group there as well. So not only were the methodology written by a group of experts, they were also vetted by the public consultation process. And then after that, one additional step for Vera actually adopted these. So Vera actually has been involved with the CCS Plus initiative from the very beginning as well. They were put out for validation against the standard for a very last standard. So what we believe then is that and this is all falling into place at the same time because the PCS methodology was adopted back in June, and then the modules for direct air capture, transportation of the CO2, and storage of the CO2, and geologic was adopted on the 24th of October, like a couple of weeks ago. And so then we are getting as well the ICAO or SIA is another necessary step because as Steve showed, a lot of these credits are going to be retired in the aviation industry because that is one of the compliance markets that is ahead of the. And so we're very excited then to have all of these pieces fall into place. It doesn't happen on its own. It takes a lot of effort and planning. And so we're right at the end of everything and we're happy with the result.
Before David takes the mic, can we go back to the slide with the buyers? Oh, by the way, I've seen a lot of net zero slides in my day. These are some really amazing slides, like animated slides, just even residual emissions over time. The aviation example, right? IATA example is so helpful and crystal clear. Okay, so thank you. Now, David, this is, if you weren't here earlier, this is the list of the buyers so far with for tons, CDR tons from the Stratos facility. And we are talking tons of 200,000, 100,000 a year, right? Major delivery plans. 500,000 Airbus. Yeah. Okay, 400,000 Airbus. 500,000 Microsoft, 250. Big. Okay.
I made a reference earlier to voluntary carbon market 1.2, and we are going to be pretty much 2.0. But also, if you look at the methodology and the MRV, which is a very important element to this, as this is one of the highest value instruments out there. So for that highest value instruments, you have to deliver very high value and a very high integrity MRV process. So everybody could be confident it's going to demonstrate the high frequency issuance versus the traditional what we get used to in the last 20 years. You do it once a year and so on. Here you have high frequency instrument because when I look at the history of climate projects, especially when it's dedicated and there is no other revenue stream besides the instruments. Such a large capital expenditure was very, very rare. And we need to be able to help our finance guys and high frequency transfer could be one way. And also what we did, and I'm sure we will be able to help and the whole industry develop a major institutional memory, how to do the financing, what are the challenges versus OpEx, CapEx, what type of subsidies we can. So this is really, could be very beneficial for the entire sector.
Do one more, I'll preempt it probably before we open to the floor. Pricing? You're allowed to say, you're not allowed to say.
Yeah, let's say that, but we all know it's significantly higher than other instruments. However, we have a significant longer durability and a much higher integrity. And if you look at it from that perspective, then it's actually, I think, fall in its place. But if you look at also all these buyers, they're creating baskets of their own. They're buying us to be the anchor, and then they're buying others. And it's very well known. Microsoft is the removal market pretty much, because they're buying from so many different sources. So there is a method to this madness.
And I mean, it's all about, like you said, 150 scientists and optimization and improve efficiencies to bring the costs down over time.
Question on that subject.
Catherine Romanek, from the Bureau of Economic Geology at the University of Texas at Austin. So are you going, I'm wrapping my head around this, but are you going to sell all of those credits, or are you going to take some for yourself for the low carbon fuel standard credit? Because you sell fuel in California where you could get the low carbon fuel standard credit.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
Good to get you first and talk on the phone. And on those, we are going to sell the credits on the low carbon fuel standard. Now, if someone wants to retire it into that market, then 13. But we are not selling any fuel to our parent company to the California market, so we're not registered under the system. So yeah, these will all be sold to the market.
All these sold to the California market.
Pardon me?
Say that again.
No, they will all be sold into the market. If to be perfectly honest, to be eligible for the California market, the sequestration facility must be approved by Air Resources Board. They have yet to approve one yet.
To be, watch this space. And I mean, feel free to introduce yourself, like happened.
Hi, Hugh Kelly from an Irish company called Simply Blue. We're developing a SAF facility in Canada. My question is, I wonder, at what point in your project's development did you secure the commitment of these customers?
I think this is a parallel process from the beginning. I think the first major sale was announced in 2022. We broke ground in 23. So it was running a parallel. We also had our internal sales team working on it, and we have distribution partners. You see, for example, Curate up there. It's a company who helps us with the sales, but it's an independent entity. We have SaaS for Next Gen facility who brought a lot of customers to it. So it's a parallel process, and it started very, very early before the construction. Before it actually even financial closing, we had our first commitments, substantial commitments. Airbus was the first official large-scale purchaser, but we had several smaller 10,000, 1,000 early adopters. It's a parallel process.
Okay, thank you. That's fascinating because it's trying to get that finance to bring you through to as far as FID is the challenge. So
Yeah.
very interested in your experience.
And you know, it's a very big challenge because these are all forward sales. And remember, the first buyers, they give us such a confidence. There was no methodology yet, no standard chosen yet, but they believed in so much that they were willing to go on back to give us solid commitments. And we have to deliver against it, so there's no pressure on William.
And so just to kind of wrap that up, the FID did not wait until all of these buyers were on board. It was very limited volume that had been committed at that point. So a shout out to the parent company for essentially getting started on this just off its balance sheet. It is actually, I should also mention that we subsequently, after construction started, entered into a JV with BlackRock. So we do have an investor partner on board for this Stratus plant as well. And then I don't think I mentioned it, but the Airbus sale, Airbus also then subsequently entered into letters of intent with, I think, 7 of their customer airlines, and I think they've actually gone ahead and secured contracts with a couple of them. But the list of airlines was like IAG, EasyJet, Lufthansa, Air France KLM, Air Canada, Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Pauline. I work for Perspectives Climate Group, and on top of that, I'm also the Deputy Secretary General. It's a really difficult word of the CCS Plus initiative. So I've been in close contact with William and with David quite often. I wanted to also go back to your question because I am working on a project at the same time, but it's a VEX project, and there have been forward sales on that project as well, which is the project between Belstead and Northern Lights in Europe. And this was basically part of their FID. So because it didn't reach yet, that they would actually be able to break even, but it did help to make the decision to continue with the project. So there is a need for these forward buying, because otherwise these projects do not happen, basically. So that was very important. I do have other questions, but they're very technical, but because I know them, are you sure? Okay. So, because I understand that first you make pellets. Did you also think about using the pellets? Can you use them for something else than burning them to catch the CO2?
Certainly, we could use those pellets, but then we would need to put more calcium in the system as well. So you would have to figure out all of the supply chain logistics of that, but it's certainly possible. Now, the actual CO2 that we take the pellet with your calcium carbonate, and run it through the calciner to release the CO2. That CO2 then can be made into a fuel, process. It can be utilized in other manner. But that technology, those technologies for utilization are running in parallel. And so, 500,000 tons a year is a lot of CO2. Those technologies aren't up to that scale. So that's why geologic exploration is where the CO2 will go for the, certainly for the first few years of production. But the options are there. We have a vision for a clean campus. So we do have surface acreage available, as you can see in the video. We can put industries there to utilize that CO2. Those technologies already.
Okay, very good. I think there are other questions. Yeah.
Hi, Andrew Westgate from GLA Piper. How are you thinking about a potential repeal of tax credits under the IRA by the incoming administration? What kind of impact would it have on the economics of the facility? And do you think there's a different risk of direct air capture 45Q credits versus, say, the PTC for hydrogen or solar?
Steve, would you like to take that one?
You got a gold star for that.
I'm good.
I was wondering who's gonna ask that.
Give it a try. First point is, we worked well with the first Trump administration, and we expect to be able to work well with the next Trump administration. And emphasize as well that carbon management, and including the tax credits, has bipartisan support, and and I think that there's a recognition that there's energy security implications, there are jobs at stake, and including in deep red states and so on. So I think it's too early to say what the impacts will be, but we believe we have the ability to navigate whatever decisions are made by the new administration. And just again, just come back to the point of the things that we're reliant on or that we are utilizing in the economics of the project have pretty broad bipartisan support.
And if you just think about it, you look at the names of those companies, they are, I think, fully aware of the reality of US politics, and they're making this decision. So we're not alone to be confident that it's possible to work with whatever administration we're going to have or the next Trump administration.
While we're waiting on the next question, Pauline, I'm just kind of following up on yours about the pellets that we make. The pellets that we make then are broken down into the CO2, the water, and the chemicals, and then recycled. So we are recycling, we're reusing in the process. And then those are the loops that we generate. Another one of you.
I know, no, we'll go here first and I'll bring it.
First of all, thank you very much for the really interesting presentation. I am Dan David from a CBL startup called Carbon Blue, pretty much inspired by carbon engineering. And my question is really technical. At 2018, Carbon Engineering published a very detailed techno-economic analysis in June for basically the same technology that is implemented in Stratos. And I want to ask, how accurate were you? And if not, what were the main surprises that you encountered along the way as you scaled up?
Okay, I will comment on that. That paper that was written way back there when the technology was just being developed. As far as if you look at it on the building blocks of that paper, everything was right. What you will find though is that the assumptions that were made in there were either conservative or not conservative. And so what we've been able to do is we've advanced the research, made improvements to the technology, even on paper before the plans are built, and even why it's built. It's in the process, as you can see, the second phase of the project is more efficient than the first. That we're making improvements. So we have kind of written a redraft of that paper that will probably be published at some time that will show you, yes, directionally the paper was perfect, and we'll get it make huge improvements.
Thank you.
Just while we're waiting on the next question, if there is one, I want a couple of things. First of all, thanks to the very kind comments on the slides. We do have, I mean, it's important that we're able to engage with parts of Abate sectors and others to understand what it is that we're trying to do. So we do put a lot of effort. We have a great team back in Houston, led by Rachel Porter, that puts all of this together for us. And I want to shout out to them because it really helps us to stand up here and show things in a clear manner. And the other thing I want to point out is that we also have Kel and Navjot in the audience here, that if we can't answer any of the questions, then we can always throw it open to our colleagues as well.
And the slides will be made available after it's delivered. So
Hello, my name is Oliver. I'm from Carbfix in Iceland, and we provide mineral storage of CO2, including for direct air capture. My question is, you mentioned Corsia, which is becoming a kind of a compliance system for the aviation industry to reduce or offset emissions. Can you give us a sense of how important that is in terms of increasing the market for your product?
Okay, great question on that. And what you'll notice is that most of the buyers on this event come from the voluntary market. The standards that we're writing with CCS Plus is, being adopted by Vera. It's a voluntary market. But what we see is that, and we think will happen, and we love to happen, is that there's convergence between the voluntary and the compliant. Because that, I think, is what we need globally to be able to move forward with predictability, that assurance, so that we can achieve the finances that we can achieve. Specifically, of course, it's one of the visions. It's the tripod of the United Nations. You have the international aviation, you have maritime, and then you have the Article 6. And so this is kind of at the pinnacle of the compliance market. So I would say yes, CORSIA and its adoption is very important for the direction that we're moving.
With most of the credits already secured in forward sale, are you aiming to have a certain number of spot transactions, or is the idea to sell everything?
For the spot transaction, we need a functional plan. So, and that's coming. And then I'm sure that spot is going to be part of the profile. It's very interesting to see one of the buyers there, Trafigura, who is one of the most well-known trading entity on the planet. So I would not be surprised that spot is going to come. But for that, we need approved methodology, we need issued credits, we need a functioning plan. These are all coming next year.
Yeah, that's an important one to underscore, like Trafi is part of that. Steel, cement, chemical, like hard to abate beyond aviation. I assume there's interest very much in talks, right? Especially.
Yeah, we have a comprehensive sales team who is working on all these client categories. Our distribution partners are engaging these categories, but I think it's too early to comment on a spot transaction. But everybody else, I believe, believes I'm trading for 26 years. I'm very confident it's coming.
I knew it was gonna come from that corner. Get ready for a few more times.
Thanks, Tim Dixon, INAGHD. Thank you very much for the presentation, Steve. Brilliant video. If we have time at the end, can we see it again?
Yeah.
That's not the main question, but can you just talk us two questions? Can you just talk us again through the energy inputs to Stratos? Because I don't know if I've brought all of those. And the second one is on the storage side, how's that going? How was the Class 6 permit application? Have you got all that in place, or is that still pending?
I'll do the energy inputs and hand it back to Will to talk about the storage. So there's two major energy consumers in this facility. The fans, the air contactors, that's an electrical supply, and then the natural gas in the calcine. The electrical supply is a plant that's been built dedicated for this facility. So it's a solar PPA that we have for this. Thinking ahead, thinking forward, our vision is really any form of zero emissions power works for us, and that could be solar PPAs, it could be wind, it could be nuclear, it could be thermal with CCS, it could be net power, which obviously is also an investor in. So lots of optionality on that, depending on where the location is and what suits that particular location. But natural gas is also needed for this, and in this generation of the technology, for sure, we need a natural gas supply. So that's also a consideration, picking locations in outside of the US.
Tim, that's a great question as well on the sequestration. How are we coming along on that? Steve mentioned earlier along that the direct air capture technology is location agnostic. It is, but you'd also need to have a place to either store or utilize the CO2 that you do capture to make sure that it's taken out of the ecosystem permanently. And in our case, we have the geologic sequestration that is located beneath the plant itself. In a formation that we have years of experience with. It's very well characterized. Catherine at the Bureau of Economic Geology is probably as much of an expert on this as anyone is. But it's a very secure place. It's very known geology, accepted geology. We have made the Class 6 the EPA's Class 6 injection permit application. And so we will have up to 3 injection wells there on the side. And work with all of the monitoring wells that go along with it, the monitoring program. Do everything as well, as I mentioned earlier, the engineering plan, the design of the technology. That seems like that gets all the headlines, but it doesn't work without everything else there in the background. It's sequestration. You know, we're in very good shape.
Can you say which formation is the sewage reservoir and what depth it is?
I did, yeah, that's out in the public because the application has gone out for public comment from EPA, and it's part of the San Andreas.
I also had a question on the natural gas, but that will come. I had a question. How long is the lifetime for such a plant?
The pipeline?
No, just the lifetime.
Oh, the lifetime of the plant. The lifetime of the plant, the design is now. I believe it's Steve is confirming that it's for 25 years.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Excuse me. Steve is confirming that it's 25-year life design of the plant.
Any other question? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stefano Cappello from Line. We are in Italian startup that has started country with the Line as well, but we use another typology of storage. So instead of geological storage, we are going to explore the ocean. So calcium bicarbonate, oceanic enhancement as a way to store CO2 where there is no geological storage. So the question is, are you evaluating your vision also other places, other technologies in order to store CO2 more than geological sequestration or not?
The sequestration technologies, we have a rich history of geologic sequestration. We know it. We know that the risk of reversal is 0.00. I mean, that's very low, almost negligible. We're very confident in that, and there is sufficient pore space that we have identified in the areas where we're currently building plants in design building and designing plants in Texas. And also Steve is involved in different locations around the world. There is sufficient geologic storage space for that. And so that's where we're comfortable. That's where we believe is the high durability for our project. Doesn't mean that there are not other options that are good, but at this point, I play out the moment.
Any others? Going once? Twice? This is your chance. How many of you have actually been there to Stratus? Oh, seriously? Oh, I mean, I haven't either, but I want to go now. I am a bit surprised. I mean, it's quite an engineering marvel, and I especially you're so close.
I mean, do you have any plans to like make a system for showing this to people? I mean, like for bringing visitors?
Yeah, and like next year. Say that louder.
Just so everybody can hear, do you have any plans for how you might bring visitors in to show the technology and showcase your project?
Well, I'm trying to think how to, but we've already had visits. We could take people around the facility. I'm going to hesitate to give any commitments here because priority is going to be you know, the last thing that the team on site wants is guided tours right now, because they're really at the sharp end of completion of this project, and this is where it really gets tough. And you know, closing out all of the actions on the construction side and then getting the commissioning going. The next few months is going to be extremely busy for the site team in getting it started up. But for sure, we're going to be showcasing this when the time is right, and we'd love to be able to invite interested parties to come and see it.
Okay, just because I have the mic, I'll ask one more. Do you have any targets for surface footprint reductions in next generation? Do you have any targets for those? Thank you.
I'm going to say I hesitate to give any particular numbers, but you can see immediately that going from phase 1 to phase 2 of this plan, this is the 250,000 ton front end that you see up here. This is 500,000 ton central facility. These have been built already. This is what we envisage for that second phase, where we have 30% fewer air contactors and only 5 pellet reactors compared to the 26 in the first part of it. So there's already a squeezing down of this. But just to give an idea of the size of this, we're talking about for this 500,000 ton train, I think we're at around about 60 acres, roughly, and in a 1 megaton dual train, we're envisaging around about 110 acres. But clearly there are some opportunities for optimization in that footprint.
And so Catherine, you think about the density here, for 500,000 tons a year for the time. But yeah, we'll get better on that. We're fishing for the process. I guess that comes after as well.
Hi, this is Kashif Nawaz from Open National. Kashif Nawaz from Open National Lab in the United States. I joined at very last minute, but I have been reading a lot of stuff about it. My question is related to you mentioned about optimization of the system. Have you considered the daily variation of the CO2 level at a particular location and how that can impact the overall process?
Okay, this is daily variation of CO2 in the atmosphere. Okay, you'll find. I mean, you're a scientist. The variation that you're talking about is probably still very small. That our technology doesn't even notice it. So mostly it's the temperature that more affects the process than the little small change of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And so we do have changes throughout the year from the winter months to the summer months, the way the plant operates, which is effective to operate.
So don't want to challenge you on this, but there are this was actually a recent finding for me as well. The variation, depending upon the location, can be quite significant. And I'm not talking about just 10, 20 parts per billion. It can be up to 200 parts per billion. That has factors for humidity, temperature, all of this. But again, I can share a study published recently.
Great, we'd like to talk to you on that. I know Steve and his group look at locations, all that. Great information to consider.
Thank you. Great technology. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
One more question. If there was a delay in the approval of the class 6 well, is there an alternative class 2 well you could utilize for injection?
Yeah. On that one, I guess what we're doing is doing everything possible to make sure that the class 6 permit will be issued on time, which is going to the plant being ready for commercial operation. And so I would just say that that's our plan.
Well, I think we've exhausted, we do have the space. 1.5 has the space for the next 15 minutes or so, which means that you are able to network, watch the video again and again and again. But before we do, any final comments? Steve, William, David for the group?
Just want to say thank you for coming and engaging and for the really interesting questions. As Katie says, we'll be around for a good while here if you want to ask any further questions or make any further observations. I'll keep this thing going on.
Thank you all for your interest in this, and mentioned before, it's exciting to us. I hope it's exciting to us. Thank you for your interest in this, and this is just the first of many to come. So we're very happy that we've reached this stage, and thank you for all the support that we've gotten for across the board on this, from the EPA on the permits, from investors, BlackRock, the confidence of our original purchasers. So yeah, it's nice. At these COP events, we talk about all of the things that are necessary to start building capacity and moving forward. We've been listening 3 or 4 years ago, and that's just down. So it's nice to see results.
I think this project is a very good example that climate mitigation, climate action is a collaborative exercise. And we are very grateful for all the early adapters who enable us to sit here from the buyer side and from the leadership of our company who is willing to be visionary to bet on it before it. But it's truly, if you look at from the methodology perspective, from the buyer's pool, the various associations, AITA, this is truly collaborative, and that's the only way it works. That's why we're glad to see that some of our colleagues who are posting CO2 from our testing competition is here. Everybody, this is the only way it's going to work.
I think that's really.
Nobody
really
can do this alone.
And markets matter. Carbon markets
Okay,
matter.
it's really fantastic. We are looking forward to work further with Edgar and your team. So thank you.
So I knew not to be dangerous on Stratus and obviously 1.5 before this session, but I learned a lot about this session or a lot about the project as well. It really is, it was a treat to host this. And the video is even cooler when you come up close. So stick around, network for a little while. I want to thank you very, very much, gentlemen. And we appreciate the leadership of 1.5, carbon engineering, and